War veteran Joseph Green, once honored for bravery, found himself humiliated by officers, handcuffed as his family watched in anguish. A video recorded by an attorney sparked citywide outrage on social media, turning the tide and leading to unexpected consequences. On a hot summer day in a small southern town, the air buzzed with the sounds of cicadas and the sweet scent of jasmine climbing the walls of houses. 65-year-old Joseph Green, a tall and sturdy man with a penetrating gaze and gray hair, walked down a quiet street with his family. He wore a light linen shirt, slightly faded with age, and comfortable pants. Leisurely, he recounted stories of his youth to his grandchildren, recalling the times he fought bravely for his country, paraded with honor medals, and felt like a hero. His voice, deep and confident, spoke calmly, but with a touch of nostalgia. His daughter Clara, a graceful woman with a warm smile and gentle eyes, walked beside him, savoring the rare opportunity to spend time with her father. Beside her, slightly behind, two small children ran, laughing and teasing each other. The evening sun cast a golden glow on their dark curls as they played. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by the sharp wail of a police siren. Joseph flinched, and the children froze, their laughter abruptly stopping. Clara turned to the road, eyes filled with worry. Blue and red lights flashed, illuminating the street and casting shadows on the pavement. Two white police officers stepped out of the patrol car, which had come to a stop across from them, moving with a confident and brisk demeanor, their faces masked with a professional, cold indifference. Officer Davis, a tall man with a buzz cut and sharp features, scanned Joseph with a look filled with latent suspicion. His partner, Wilson, slightly younger but wearing the same stern expression, rested a hand on his holster, as if preparing for the worst-case scenario. Joseph felt tension shoot through his body. Old instincts from his military days resurfaced instantly, filling him with a mix of caution and inner defiance. "Hands up, right now!" Davis barked, stepping forward. His voice echoed down the empty street, finding every crevice and causing hearts to skip a beat. Joseph looked at his daughter, who clutched her children protectively, eyes wide with terror. He raised his hands slowly, eyes steady but jaw tight, beads of sweat tracing cold lines down his temples betraying his anxiety. Before he could speak, he was spun around to face the patrol car. The cold bite of handcuffs on his wrists stung sharply. Joseph locked eyes with Clara. In her gaze, fear and helplessness swirled, while the children, bewildered and frightened, couldn't grasp the seriousness of the scene, but felt the adult's tension. The street seemed to hold its breath, filled only with the pulsing glow of the sirens and Joseph's labored breathing, as he stood restrained but unbowed. The officers held Joseph firmly by the elbows, preventing him from even turning to his family. His heart raced, and images of past years flashed before his eyes. Battles, medals, moments when he felt pride in serving his country. But now, all of that seemed distant and insignificant. He tried to speak, his voice rough and strained. "Officers, I was just walking home with my family. This has to be a mistake," he managed, trying not to show fear. His words hung in the air, swallowed by the chorus of night insects and the rustling of leaves. "Shut up, old man!" Officer Wilson snapped, gripping Joseph's shoulder tightly. "We got a report of a car theft in the area, and you fit the description." Joseph wanted to yell, to protest, to explain that he had nothing to do with it, that he was a respected veteran with medals for bravery. He tried to turn his head towards Officer Davis, to catch his eye and plead for a shred of empathy. "There are documents and awards in the trunk of my car. Please, check them," Joseph attempted, but once again, his words were ignored. Davis only exchanged a glance with his partner, continuing the procedure as if Joseph had said nothing of consequence. Meanwhile, a crowd of neighbors began to gather. People emerged from their homes, peering out and cautiously approaching the scene. Some held phones but hesitated to record, fearing repercussions. The neighbors' eyes reflected a mix of shame and powerlessness. A few women clutched their children, shielding them from the sight of a hero being humiliated before their eyes. Clara looked at her father, unable to hold back tears. She knew his worth, how much he had done for a country he now defended not on a battlefield, but in front of his grandson. The small hands of her son gripped her arm, his young eyes questioning and scared, not understanding why their hero, Grandpa, was being arrested. Despite the charged atmosphere, no one dared intervene. Fear of the police was too strong. Even a silent indignation bubbled within the onlookers, holding them in place at the uneasy boundary between justice and disorder. The crowd parted as Michael Bryant pushed through, a tall man with close-cropped hair and a sharp suit. His face was resolute, his eyes fixed on the scene unfolding in front of him. Michael was known in the town for advocating civil rights, particularly against abuses of power. He'd witnessed similar events many times, but each one sparked the same righteous anger. "What's going on here?" he called out, phone raised and recording. His voice was strong and clear, commanding attention from both the police and the spectators. People in the crowd exchanged glances, whispers of dissent rippling through the group. Someone shouted, "Leave him alone!" while another added, "That's Joseph. He's a veteran." Officers Davis and Wilson immediately noticed the man with the camera. A flicker of unease crossed their faces. Davis's brow furrowed, his lips pressed into a thin line, but he held back, staring coldly at Michael. Wilson stepped back slightly, not removing his hand from his belt, though his confidence seemed shaken. "We're doing our job, sir," Davis said, trying to keep his voice steady. Yet there was a waver of uncertainty as Michael stepped closer, still filming. "Your job is to violate the rights of innocent citizens? This man is respected nationwide, and you're treating him like a criminal," Michael said, projecting his voice for all to hear. His eyes stayed locked on the officers. Approval murmured through the crowd. Encouraged by the lawyer's support, people grew louder. "Let him go! Shame!" The officers realized the situation was slipping out of control, every movement now documented. With reluctance, Davis nodded to Wilson, who loosened his grip. The handcuffs creaked as they opened, and the metal restraints clattered to the ground. Joseph lifted his hands, rubbing the reddened marks on his wrists, and met Michael's gaze, one full of reassurance and solidarity. The crowd erupted in relieved cheers, some applauding. The tension began to ebb, though concern and anger still hung in the air. Michael nodded at Joseph, silently signaling that this fight wasn't over. The video Michael Bryant recorded spread like wildfire. Within hours, it garnered hundreds of thousands of views and thousands of comments. People across the nation, and soon the world, shared the footage, voicing outrage and support for Joseph Green. On the screen, the elderly veteran, whose wrinkled hands still bore marks from the handcuffs, was seen maintaining his dignity despite the rough treatment. Social media filled with hashtags like "Justice for Joseph" and "Hero Not Criminal." News outlets picked up the story, with local news channels interviewing Joseph's neighbors, who described him as a noble man with a generous heart, undeserving of such mistreatment. Officers Davis and Wilson, whose faces were clearly visible in the footage, were put under public scrutiny and media pressure. The city's administration announced their temporary suspension, pending an internal investigation to quell rising public anger. But these steps did not satisfy the public. Protests began gathering in the town's main square. People carried signs saying, "Justice for all," and "End police bias." Citizens who once feared repercussions now took to the streets, demanding change. Protesters ranged from veterans and Joseph's fellow servicemen to young activists inspired by his ordeal. Joseph, initially surprised by the outpouring of support, stood on his porch, watching the growing crowd. Clara held his hand tightly, understanding that her father was once again a symbol of resilience and courage, this time in a different battle, for justice and equality. This story became a catalyst for significant reforms. Pressured by public demand, the City Council convened an emergency meeting to review law enforcement policies and initiate anti-bias training programs. Despite the humiliation he endured, Joseph participated in these discussions, emphasizing the importance of respect and equality for all members of the community. Now, with his story known nationwide, Joseph Green had become not only a war hero, but also a symbol of the fight against systemic racism. His determination and refusal to give in to fear inspired thousands and reminded them that justice is attainable if pursued with determination and dignity.